Making people do what you want is a greater power than any bomb ever created. But that wasn't the whole story, because when you can make people do what you want, you still have to figure out what they should do. So the greatest power of all is to make people believe what you want, because then they'll use what they know and find ways to help you that you don't even realize. But this is hard to do, because we tend to assume that people's beliefs are based on reason. When they're not, we tend to think that it's a mistake or a fluke, which the right people won't do. But I don't think it is a mistake. Everyone does this. And things that take advantage of it have made people ignore what they see with their own eyes, commit crimes, and even end their own lives at someone else's command. How could this be possible? Well, in this video, we're going to talk about how I think beliefs really work, under the surface, and how this can be used for good or evil. The first thing to know is that we can't know everything. We have to simply assume that some things are true, especially when we start learning about the world. We copy our parents and we try other things out. We let something go, it falls. If we touch this, it hurts, and so on. And we build our understanding on that. But this means that if something goes against these core ideas, we lose everything based on it. And this is dangerous, especially when we're older.
It's like we're old children again.
Because we need our understanding to survive. So, we tend to resist things that require us to change too many of our core thoughts. It might not seem smart, but it is. After all, if our way of thinking has been good enough to survive to this point, it's better to keep it than to be stuck rethinking every decision we make. And in fact, doing that is so dangerous that just the thought of it makes us sick.
Dyson listened while the Terminator laid it all down. Skynet, Judgment Day. He took it pretty well.
I feel like I'm gonna throw up.
And so, as we age, we focus only on fine-tuning how we already think and ignore things that are too different. But actually, that's just a small part of it, because in the larger sense, our brains are not thinking engines. They're reproduction engines. They do what's necessary to give us the best chance of surviving and having children. And a lot of times, good thinking helps that, but not always. Because to have kids, we need other people. And if those people don't want us, then it does not matter how true our beliefs are. Someone in a village of people who have some silly beliefs has much better chances than someone who is perfectly rational but alone.
In all the memories, no one had ever returned from the land of the dead.
So now, we all put our relationships and our reputation above the quality of our ideas, and focus on thinking well only when it doesn't threaten those relationships or our reputation. On top of that, accepting a true idea can be bad if it aids someone who we think will hurt us in other ways. So, though we might not know it, we also decide our response to an idea by who it will help. And over millions of years, these became programmed into our heads. So what I'm saying to you is that clear, logical thinking is and always has been a secondary part of our brains. We do it only when it helps us, and when it doesn't, our brain will turn it off instantly. And you can see this everywhere, from online flaming to journalism, and even people whose whole job is to be fair. And not just that, this explains many other things science has found. Take a look. In the 60s, Candid Camera did a prank where people on elevators were surrounded by others who would all stand backward. Inevitably, the victim would turn around too. It became famous because it was funny. But why did it happen? You could say they were just sheep, but this happened with people of all different backgrounds. Now, maybe it was just awkward to be face to face with the other people, and that's all that was going on. But then there's the Ash experiment, where one person is told that they're taking a test with a group. They have to say which lines are the same length. At first, the group gives sensible answers, and the subject does too. But eventually, the group's answers change. They become clearly wrong. And a lot of the time, the subject goes along and starts giving the wrong answer too. This study has been repeated, and the same thing happens. We might think that people just don't want to be rude, and some subjects said that, but others said something different, that they started questioning their own eyes. Now, at this point, the experiment ends, so we don't know what happens if this keeps going. But there's someone else that can give us a clue. And her name was Patty Hearst, a college student in the 70s from a wealthy family who was kidnapped by a group of domestic terrorists. After a few months, she joined them and helped rob a bank and commit other crimes. The courts convicted her and didn't accept brainwashing as a defense. But I think the cause here is obvious. If our brain recognizes that its social group believes certain things strongly, it will align itself with those beliefs in order to survive and reproduce in the group. This was the Ash experiment taken to its very dark and very real conclusion. Now, you might wonder why she didn't simply lie to fit in. But like we've said, the only liar that can't be caught is a believer. So the brain changes its actual thoughts to match the group. This is also known in psychology as Stockholm Syndrome. In each case like this, once we know the idea, we can see it show up over and over. Scientists found out that people will reject unfair splits of money even if it means they get zero, which objectively should be worse. But they do it because accepting the unfair offer would damage their reputation, which is more important. In each of these, we see the same thing. What seems like irrational behavior is not. In nearly every situation, there's a good reason for it. But beyond that, in understanding these reasons, we can see how people's thoughts, beliefs, and entire personalities can be controlled. The first and most relevant example is suicide attackers. By normal measures, there should be no way that a person would agree to kill themselves for someone unrelated to them. But now we can see how it happens. Most suicide attackers are raised from birth with certain political or spiritual beliefs, so the need to follow certain orders is already deep in their minds. And the attacker's sacrifice is linked to their reproductive feelings, sometimes by telling them that they'll have many wives in the afterlife, or by using their connection to their family, making the sacrifice a matter of honor for their family, or putting the country or group in their family's place, to trick the brain into thinking that the sacrifice will help others who share their genes. And here we start to see how dictators have gained power. Besides that trick, they use what I like to call indirect argument. Telling someone to their face that they're wrong will almost always stop them from listening, because it threatens their reputation and makes you seem mean. You do much better if you describe your position nicely to someone else and let them overhear you. This is why politicians try to only give speeches, even in debates where they're supposed to be talking to each other. By making points to no one in particular and repeating them over and over, you make it look like everyone accepts the idea, creating a sort of atmospheric peer pressure, which triggers people's urge to align with an unchallenged group belief. On top of that, they put off the image of being a great person, assuring everyone that accepting these thoughts will help someone good. Now, when this works, our minds will reprogram themselves slowly. We move from one belief to the new one in a step-by-step way. First finding it not absurd, then repeating some of what we hear, until we eventually take on the whole thing. This protects both the stability of our thinking and, very importantly, our reputation, because switching slowly is less noticeable. But no matter how we get there, the results can be frightening. I found examples of people mutilating or burning themselves to death and even killing their own children. And if they'll do that, they'll do anything. And this can happen to every one of us. Facts don't matter. Character doesn't matter. Every human brain has the power to overwrite its entire personality if it needs to. The only way to avoid this is to stay in an environment of diverse opinions. And not just in the media. Even reading a one-sided political book can trigger this in us, no matter how crazy it may be. We also have to avoid any group that wants to link our love life to following their orders, and any group that claims to be a member of your family. Brothers will die for each other. Big Brother just makes you die for him. But beyond that, we also can use this for good. The same terrorists who resist hours of physical abuse when being interrogated have been shown to come around easily if the actual sub-rational source of their resistance is found and removed. And it goes much further. which we'll dive into in our next video, where we'll apply what we've learned with some other tricks to show how you can destroy an entire country with no weapons, money, or army. It's going to be very different, but also very fun. Until then, thanks, and I return you to your regularly scheduled YouTube programming.